It's with a great humbleness and gratitude that I find myself in this place with this group of people at the front of the room, thinking about the experience I had a few years ago of spending one day in the language and learning class with you and your uncle, and learning and practicing without any writing how to try and be comfortable enough to say Asa Rebecca Johnson. And I really appreciated the question about being a baby learner, because what I want to share with you today is partly about the experience of what that means as settlers in this position, and what it means to have to start rethinking, so that the beginning question is, where am I in this place and this time? And how does it feel to start understanding why and when we might make acknowledgments, and what those acknowledgments might be, so that we can pull together the learning that's necessary as we start down this path by sometimes doing what seems like a rote acknowledgement of what it means to be in this territory, and to gradually move ourselves to the place where our acknowledgments of what it means to be in this territory are embedded and embodied in the walking we do, the steps that we take that lead us to live our lives in this place, so that when we say that we are in WSÁNEĆ territory, we are in the places that have been lived in by the WSÁNEĆ, by the Songhees, by the Esquimalt, that we know what that means and we know what our place is in that acknowledgement. And so I want to express my gratitude for the opportunity to think through those questions with you today, and my gratitude for you also for being here with us on this voyage as we all think about what it means to place ourselves into the conversation that we're having today. What does it mean to take up the challenge and take up the gift that's being offered to us to think about placing ourselves in this story? The article may not be ready for a month, but a piece of it is, because I was just too excited, and so I think this portion of this page is up on my Facebook page if anyone wants to read little parts about the relationship between the blockades of '75 and the blockades of today. But what I'd like to share with you today are three things, I guess three observations that I had after reading this article. I've been living with it since it was delivered to me, and it's been living in my house and been living in the conversations that I've been having with my children. And the things I want to just speak briefly to are some thoughts about the importance of language, some thoughts about the importance of land, and some thoughts about the importance of relationship. And for me, relationship to my own past, my own present, and my own future as expressed in conversations with my own children about this article. There's my mapping. So I guess I would like to start by saying this should be mandatory reading in every high school in British Columbia, in every law school in Canada, and for the Supreme Court of Canada. This is a history that's gathered together in this article that I think will buttress us all, and I'm looking forward to everyone having a chance to read it and having us discuss it. What I love about it is that it starts us with a question of why language matters to how we think about the history that we have, and that language matters not only for those who are native speakers of that language, but to all of us who want to build a relationship to land. So there is great beauty in the beginning of this article, in the conversation in the section on the WSÁNEĆ understandings of sovereignty, that, as Nick said, encourage us to think about why it matters to us as, I'll speak for myself, me as a settler, born in Treaty 7 territory, birthed my children in Mi'kmaq-Maliseet territory, and now have raised them in WSÁNEĆ territory with deep connections to Secwepemc territory, where we spend our summers. So there's a bunch of language places to be. But to understand why it matters to think about the ways that the breath can be carried in the language, and to say, as they say in this article, that to carry, you carry my breath with me in language when we move, in saying hello and goodbye, tells us something about ourselves. It's not just that the word allows us to greet and say hello and goodbye, but it reminds us that we carry in us the breath of those that we speak to in our conversations, and that breath, those words, those conversations, then become a part of who we are, and we carry them forward whether or not it's whether or not we're speaking the same language. So I was grateful for that as you were singing at the beginning in the song, which reminded me that even in the hearing of the song, we're hearing deep lessons about what we carry into ourselves through the sound and through the language and through the breath, and that can be a really important teaching for us that we can take forward in our lives that can help buttress us and strengthen us in our own daily life as we think about the sovereignty of the place that we're in and the breath that circulates here. So it matters if we understand that Tetechis, I'm going to practice words with no apology, islands as ancestors of the deep. It matters to me now when I fly over the islands and I look down and think that what I'm seeing is not just land. It is a gift of the Creator, and it's a relation. And I can be in relation with that person, even if that person is not my most proximate, closest relative. To see the islands as relatives is to change the nature of your relationship with those places. And so the language can also help us think about the land. And both those things point us to the importance of relationship. That the goal in all of this struggle over sovereignty is not just to say whose sovereignty it is, though I'm with Nick. Like, it's not the Canadian state, it's not the British state who has a legitimate claim to sovereignty. It's not. So what is the relationship of those of us who can't ground ourselves in legality to this place? So the relationship piece that I'd like us to think about together, or that I'm thinking about with my children, I'd love to be in conversation with you, is what does it mean for us to become, as John said, awake? So what is it to wake up? What does that require of us? And how can we start to think about the demand on us as one that asks us to ask ourselves the question, what is my relationship to this land? What form of legality or sovereignty am I willing to see or visibilize? Can I live my life in this place in ways that accord with deep understanding of the history of this place and the importance of language and land in the ways that I walk? Can I understand myself as a learner to these questions? Can I understand myself as someone who has obligations to continue the conversations, to educate myself, to begin to pick up the language, to begin to hear the stories, and realize that to be awake is something that happens every day. So for me, reading this article, I was struck again and again by the number of times that I thought, I knew that. I've been told that before. I've heard that. And to understand that that experience is one that is actually a part of the process of building the relationships. And it's part of what can provide us with, I want to think of it as the spine or the courage to kind of keep going on this path, to understand that this path of reconciliation, I'll do the same thing as research for you, is actually one that is going to touch each of us in a different way. And that work of reconciliation is something that we can in fact pick up and can feel encouraged about. As I was reading this portions, I'd run to the other room and I'd make my kids listen as I read a piece, and then I'd run back to the other room, and then I'd, in my outrage, run back out and run back in as I sort of, by a certain number of times as I was running. One of my boys was saying to me, it's really hard not to feel paralyzed, because in some ways, reading this, has anyone been to see Frozen 2 yet? Anyone? Okay, I'm going to also recommend you go see Frozen 2, which is in a non-ironic way a story about sovereignty and colonization, where spoiler alert, where the young Disney-created characters discover that the story they've been told of their story is false, and in fact that their grandparents killed the equivalent to kind of, we'll call Sami-esque people of the north, and built a big dam to dam the waters. Just gonna say, anyway, I don't know if you know any similarities. But one of the little pieces in the story, we can look for guidance anywhere we go, is that the girls have to ask the question, faced with the trauma of realizing the place that they're actually on, is what would it mean to just do the next right thing? And that's, I guess, the question that we're left with here. What is the next right thing, and what might that look like from the position that you stand? Is it helpful to feel paralysis in the face of the truth of this past? The truth of this past is a brutal one. What can be done in the places that we're at in ways that allow us to say to each other, we are harnessed to this project, there will be many ways forward, and the most crucial thing is the thing that they close with, and those are my closing words that I want to just echo, and then you can read them in a month. And that is, the transformation of the state is crucial. But the transformation of the state's role is conceivable but extremely challenging and would require foundational, including constitutional change. This can only occur if non-Indigenous people embrace the principal validity and thus righteousness of Indigenous sovereignty. And that's the piece I'm going to carry forward with myself, is what is it necessary for me to do in order to have a daily practice of being awake to the righteousness of Indigenous sovereignty, and that to say it is righteous means that I harness myself to that goal and take up the practices I can in the many places that I walk, in the ways that I live, in order that my grandchildren too will understand how it is that they can live under Indigenous sovereignty in this place. So gratitude for all of you. Thank you.